Welcome to the 2020 Awards podcast. I'm Kris. I'm sitting here with our producer Lee, and our guest today is screenwriter Brad Wilke. I've asked Brad to share his 5 screenplays from 1993 that he thinks are worth his 2020 nomination this year. Brad is a screenwriter who wrote the Roger Corman classic, Camel Spiders, and he's also the feature film programmer for the Seattle International Film Festival's New American Cinema program, as well as the SIF Catalyst program. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Hey, Kris.
See, I like that one better.
I know. Well, I tried to
trying to mix it up, trying to throw me off my game, but I like that one. Brad, you are a voting member of the syndicate, and what are the 5 films you think you're going to nominate this year for Best Screenplay?
So this year, I'm looking at True Romance, which we've talked about at length earlier, Groundhog Day, which I think, again, structurally is one of those great films, Fearless, which is, I wouldn't call it an overlooked film, but I love Peter Weir, love Jeff Bridges, and I think it's just a really strong story. It's an adaptation. What's Love Got to Do with It? Biopic of Tina Turner. And my 5th film is Philadelphia, which when I saw that, I remember I was a senior in high school, and that really had a big impact on me. I thought just it was such a, even though it was sad and depressing in a certain way, it was also triumphant and sort of like human spirit style. So
human spirit, triumph. Wow,
triumph of the human spirit, right?
There we go. All right, well, we're just going to go through these alphabetically. So we're going to start with Fearless, starring Jeff Bridges and Rosie Perez. Basically, the plot. I stole all of these from IMDb, so I'm just going to read them. After a terrible air disaster, survivor Max Klein emerges a changed person, unable to connect to his former life or to his wife Laura. He feels godlike and invulnerable. When psychologist Bill Perlman is unable to help Max, he has Max meet another survivor, Carla Rodrigo, who is racked with grief and guilt since her baby died in the crash, which she and Max survived. The script was written by Rafael Yglesias. So, what is it about Fearless that made you pick this one?
Well, the thing that really drew me to Fearless is that it's a big budget studio style film that explores metaphysical plot and storyline. So, Jeff Bridges, when he has this near death experience and can't really come to terms with it, he starts pushing the boundaries, so to speak, of his life, like seeing like how. Like you could look at it as a way of like, how lucky can I continue to be because I didn't die in this horrific accident? And I feel like when he's then introduced to Rosie Perez's character, who lost her son in the crash, I love Peter Weir's films. Like I think Picnic at Hanging Rock and Walkabout are 2 great films that sort of transcend the genre. Like, I wouldn't even be able to classify them. Mm-hmm. They're almost genre-less films. But they have an anchor in like a mystical, sort of metaphysical. And I feel like Fearless also, if you wanted to do a trilogy of Peter Weir's sort of spiritual films, it would be those 3. And I just really like that. I like when commercial, like a studio film explores something like this because it opens up those concepts, I think, to a much wider audience. And I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily spiritual. I would say I'm spiritual, that I believe in a God or a higher power, but I don't know exactly how I come to that. So when I see somebody exploring these same ideas in a film format, like I in that medium, it's really interesting to me, and I think it's tough to be able to pull off, and that's why I think it's telling that this was based on the screenwriter's novel. Mm-hmm. In that this is much more of a novelistic kind of setting, or a story.
Yeah. So I just watched this the other night for the first time, and was he Jesus?
Well, I don't know. Like, I would not say that. I think that there's a lot of symbolism in the film. And that's something else that I really like about it. And I think a lot of that really I never read the screenplay as a standalone document, so I don't know how much of that Peter Weir added to, I think Yglesias, the screenwriter and the author's original work. But, I mean, I guess you could, like, and that's kind of, I mean, I don't know, to answer your question.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great thing about these kind of movies is that it leaves it open for interpretation in that sense. Like, is Jeff Bridges a metaphor, his character for
well, because
something else?
there's a moment where they have a survivors meeting, and he's not at the meeting, and one of the survivors says, "Oh, where is he? I was hoping he was here. He's why I'm alive today, because he said, 'Follow me, go into the light.'" I was like, "Well, that's pretty Jesus-like." And then there's even his coat, he's kind of wearing like this long, kind of looks like robes, and
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, when we finally see the plane crash, there's a bit where he's walking down the aisle, and every person he touches and says, "You're going to be okay," was at the survivors meeting, but then there are other people he passes over that he doesn't say that to, and we've never seen them
Probably
before.
died, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because now that Lost has come and gone, I think that becomes like sort of the quintessential airplane crash sort of story, and I think Lost explored a lot of. That's, I think, why I was drawn to Lost so much, is because it explored a lot of these sort of metaphysical ideas and, I wouldn't say necessarily spirituality so much, but like myth. I think there's a lot of myth in there. And if you look at, Jesus Christ as a historical figure, which that may, he may or may not have been, but, I think there's also a lot of like a myth in there. And what's the metaphor behind somebody coming to salvation or so, so.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. I think it's great that it's open to interpretation, and that a mainstream film, would be exploring those kind of topics.
I couldn't help thinking that M. Night Shyamalan saw this film as a young man and went, "Oh man, if he was dead the whole time, that would make a great movie." I kept waiting for it to end that way.
No, I think,
So.
That's funny.
Next up is Groundhog's Day, or Groundhog Day. I almost put an S in there, but there's no S. Bill Murray plays Phil Connors, an arrogant and egocentric Pittsburgh TV weatherman who, during a hated assignment covering the annual Groundhog event in Punxsutawney, finds himself in a time loop, repeating the same day again and again. After indulging in hedonism and numerous suicide attempts, he begins to examine his life and priorities. The screenplay was written by Danny Rubin and the film's director, Harold Ramis. We actually did a podcast on this earlier, discussing the whole film, but it's obviously a popular film. This is the second time it's made our best screenplay list from '93. So why was it your pick?
Sure. So I think Groundhog Day really stands up because it's not an over-sentimentalized look at, sort of redoing the past. Like, I think where a lot of films in this, if you want to call it a genre, sort of fall short, is that they sort of allow you to think that you can go back and, sort of relive something and make it better. And I think what Groundhog Day does is, instead of him, like, fixing one thing, he sort of, like, has this period to become a better person or a different person in his whole being. And I think, again, like, there's obviously like metaphysical underpinnings to this film as well. And, in the first film we talked about, Fearless, it's much more dramatic. And in this film, it's much more comedic. But, it's still like exploring that nature of existence and, using like what would be like a crazy conceit of, having to repeat the same day over and over. But, it works. And I think, like I said, it stands up because it doesn't over-sentimentalize the journey, and it sort of condenses this life journey of Bill Murray's character into a 24-hour period that he goes over and over. Because people always say, like, well, if I just would have that chance to do that again, I'd do it like this. Mm-hmm. But even when you have that chance to do it again, you don't necessarily do it like that, or doing it like that messes it up worse than, and so I feel like that's sort of, like, that to me is like the real, like, foundational idea of this, is that, might as well just go with the first time out. Like, that's, as good as it's ever going to get. So don't, like, don't live in the past, like that sort of, like, that regret-free existence. I think that's tough as, like, a human.
Well, do you think it's don't live in the past or live in the present?
Well, either way you want to phrase it. But
Well, I think those are two different things, though, because there's also living in the future.
Sure, like always hoping that this next thing or that next thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what his character was doing.
Yeah.
Living in the future. I'm going to get that network gig and
Right.
get out of here.
Right. Or, and that's also like Castaway, like we were talking about, is sort of like you're planning too, and you don't think about the immediate. Yeah. So, I mean, So I'll agree with you on that. Like, you could make an argument to say that those are two different things, but not just living in the present though, but not like reliving the past. Because I think like we're prone to do that. I'm at least prone to do that. Where
That's funny because I feel like I'm always living in the future.
Well.
So if whatever this space is between us, if we could meet there, I think.
Sure. Well, because I think about like past decisions a lot.
Lee, are you a present, past, or future?
I'm living right now.
I don't believe you.
You're right. I'm slave to the past.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Makes me not grow as an individual. Well, you know me.
You're smirking. I can't tell if you're serious or
No.
not. This is how you play poker too. So,
In it to win it.
but yeah, I mean, I think, if anybody who heard the other podcast, I love Groundhog Day. I think it's such a great movie, fantastic script, and as I said last time I watched it, it was really the first time because it's so damn entertaining that I get lost in it. And it was the first time I was objectively watching it and able to kind of go like, oh my God, this is a totally Buddhist film.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great framework to put it around. And that's why I think I would add it to this top 5, scripts of that year, because it does explore, like, a lot of these films are sort of like Trojan horses. And it's like they take something that's an easy pill to swallow, Bill Murray. So you're like, oh, it's a comedy, of course.
Yeah.
Right? But then it explores these ideas that are not typically explored in a mainstream setting in any format. And that's what I like about, when a director is at their height, like working, at the top of their game, or a screenwriter in a commercial field, is that they can sort of have the best of both worlds. Mm-hmm. And I think like Groundhog Day is a good example of that.
Yeah. And then, just briefly, I think that, we were talking about Back to the Future on another podcast, and like Groundhog Day, it's something that seems so simple. Like, oh, yeah, no-brainer. That would be easy to write. And it's one of those things I think, no, it's easy to screw up.
Well, it has to be so detailed. Like every little thing leads to another scene or a throwback to that scene.
Right. Well, it's another example of you could put it in a time travel genre.
Yeah, you could.
An endless loop.
Yeah.
Sort of idea.
Great movie. So, next up is Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a film directed by Jonathan Demme. Andrew Beckett, a gay lawyer infected with AIDS, is fired from his conservative law firm in fear that they might contract AIDS from him. After Andrew is fired in a last attempt for peace, he sues his former law firm with the help of a homophobic lawyer, Joe Miller. During the court battle, Miller sees that Beckett is no different than anyone else on the gritty streets of the city of brotherly love, sheds his homophobia, and helps Beckett with his case before AIDS overcomes him. The script was written by Ron Nyswaner. I'm not sure how you say his last name. Ron Nyswaner? Nyswaner? Anyway, Brad, why Philadelphia? I've never seen this movie, so...
You've never seen Philadelphia?
No.
I saw it when it came out.
Yeah.
And reading this, it sounds so hokey to me, which is, I think, why I've never seen it.
It's definitely
so.
a movie of its time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think
up today at all.
it's dated because we've changed, sort of our social mores, and culturally, it's like we don't have the same
It just seems ridiculous
feeling.
now.
That somebody would do like totally dated. And however, like that said, in the cultural context, I still think it works as a great story because it's one of those. Again, I think I call it the triumph of the human spirit
Right, yeah.
idea, right? Which is hokey, and but it's something that attracts us, that engages us,
Sure.
as humans.
Yeah.
It's like we want to hear those stories. Like I don't want to always hear negative, depressing.
Right, yeah.
And this is a depressed, but in the end, even though Tom Hanks dies, he sort of
Thanks for ruining that.
Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah. That's pretty funny. You should beep.
Well, we'll just let everybody know that all these podcasts have spoiler alerts.
Yeah.
Movies from 20 plus years ago.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, what's the length of a spoil?
Yeah.
20 years you should be able
When the movie's in the theaters.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
length of the spoiler alert.
Right. I like that. You know, and I think it's also set up class, you know, in the sense of, you know, Denzel Washington plays a homophobic lawyer who has to turn, you know, so there is like these transitions and these, you know, like character developments that are happening. So I just think like as like, if you look at a screenplay as like a piece of equipment or like a blueprint, you know, like
it's a blueprint.
really well made and it works.
Yeah.
It does its job in this. And I think what elevates all of this is the performances and the direction by Jonathan Demme, who's one of my, you know, I don't think he's really done a lot of exciting things recently, but Silence of the Lambs, Stop Making Sense, you know, like, you know, Philadelphia, like it's kind of like he's proven himself in a lot of different genres, which I think is a sign of a really good, you know, you could be a Martin Scorsese and just keep sort of revisiting the same themes and the same sort of character types over and over for, you know, even though like he's done a lot of new things, but there's a period there where he was kind of like the go-to crime guy.
There's a lot of familiarity with his work.
Yeah. Whereas like I think Jonathan Demme is one of those guys, more of a chameleon.
Yeah.
That's doing, you know,
He
all
doesn't have
sorts
a
of different
type or
stuff.
genre. I mean, he does
Yeah.
Married with the Mob and then follows it up with Silence of the Lambs.
Right. Exactly. And I think Married to the Mob is a great example of
hilarious.
one of those films that came out in the 80s that would never get made today. Like outside of like an independent, you know.
Right.
An independent could make anything they want now. But,
Yeah.
you know, back then as a studio film with Michelle Pfeiffer, and, you know, it's like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Like a comedy, like just like general comedy? No way.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think like there's all these things. So I think out of all the scripts that we're talking about here, that one, and maybe to a certain degree, What's Love got to do with it, but that one is like more like the most like workman-like script that was elevated by all these other elements of the film.
All right.
But it's still a good script.
Well, if you want to see Philadelphia or any of the movies we're talking about today on the podcast, visit Scarecrow Video. Scarecrow Video is one of the largest independent video stores in the country. Located in Seattle's beautiful University District, one of the last remaining brick-and-mortar stores featuring DVDs, VHS, Laserdisc, and Blu-ray. If you can't find a movie at Scarecrow, it hasn't been filmed yet. For more info, visit scarecrowvideo.com. And our other sponsor today is Fremont Abbey. Abbey Arts is a nonprofit curating arts and cultural events for all ages at unusual spaces around Seattle and at their home venue, Fremont Abbey Arts Center in Upper Fremont. Ongoing events include The Round on second Tuesdays, which features musicians, slam poets, and live painters sharing the stage, or check out The Moth storytelling event on first Thursdays. Concerts vary throughout the month. Check their schedule at fremontabbey.org.
You've been on fire with the tossing to commercials.
The segues? Yeah.
On fire.
Yeah.
That might have been
Should
the
do
best.
a little clip of all the
best
good
of.
segues.
Best of, yeah. Maybe that'll be a whole episode.
Segues.
That'll just
Speaking of popcorn, you know, on that note,
After a while, we're just going to challenge you.
All right.
Just things you can segue.
I like that.
This table's green.
If you like green tip. Speaking of green, who needs a loan? Okay, so next up is True Romance. We actually did a podcast recently with you as our guest, but just to fill the new listeners in, True Romance is, I'm going to coin the phrase again since you liked it so much when I said it before. It's a crime dramedy. Clarence and Alabama are newlyweds who acquire an unexpected wedding present. Unknown to the blissfully happy couple, ruthless gangsters are on their tail, determined to reclaim their lost property, which happens to be a suitcase full of cocaine. The script was written by Quentin Tarantino and Brad. Why True Romance?
So, True Romance, I think, is one of the great mashup movies. Like you described the genre by having to coin a new genre. And I think if you look at this film, it goes from traditional rom-com to heist to thriller, action, family drama between Clarence and his dad, Dennis Hopper. And then, police procedural at the end. You've got that banter between Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore that could easily have come from like a CSI episode, which I think is interesting because Tarantino did go on to write 2 CSI episodes.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
I know, right? You think like CSI, like that's such a pedestrian sort of show, but so I feel like all the groundwork was sort of like if there could be like one elemental Quentin Tarantino film that's sort of archetypal I think it would be true romance, because it lays all the groundwork for the future films. There's, snippets of dialogue that's reused again in Pulp Fiction, and I think it's sort of his, throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. And I think, as you mentioned in the earlier podcast, semi-autobiographical. So instead of a video store clerk, it's a comic book store clerk.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the references that Tarantino uses, both, in his own life and in his film references, the Street Fighter, the Mac, so classic blaxploitation cinema, classic exploit, like all these different, kung fu, and then he went on to make Kill Bill, volume 1 and 2. So I think that this movie is just, it works for me as sort of like a pastiche of all these different genres, and actually seems to, I don't want to say master the genres, but puts them together in a way that is really impressive. That if each of those say little sequences were to be expanded into that type of film, so a rom-com or a police thriller, that they could work, and so I think it's just like a crazy screenplay.
It feels like it is his first screenplay, but it feels like these are every idea that I've ever had for a story, for a movie. I'm going to put them all into this one script in case I never get to do another one.
Yeah.
And it really feels that way. And it does work. I do have problems with it, as we talked in the other episode, but I do think it is his most humane work, and I wish that he was writing more stuff like this, because I think, despite whatever flaws are in it, it was a really entertaining film. And
yeah, and it was tight too structurally, with the mobsters coming in right after the cops come in.
Yeah.
And again, it walks that fine line between horrific violence and comedy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say black, that would be humorous anywhere. That's sort of arriving at the same point at the same time.
It was funny when you mentioned the mob coming in. When I was watching it this last time, it reminded me of Midnight Run.
Oh, sure.
Which has that
That's a
same
fun
sort
movie.
of you've got these three elements converging on these two main characters, and they're all kind of subverting each other, tripping each other up.
Yeah. kind
of playing leapfrog to get ahead, and it's all about who's going to get to the end first. And
yeah. It's funny, and they come in, and everybody's like, who the are these?
Right.
Nobody knows, and they're all pointing guns at
yeah.
each other. And that's funny, but it's also terrifying.
Sure.
And, I feel like that's probably all there in the script. Might not be the best script ever, but, I'd say for reconsideration, it would potentially be one of the top 5 of that year.
Yeah. Cool. Next up, What's Love Got to Do with It? This is a biopic, as you mentioned, a film about singer Tina Turner. Why did I pause there? As if I'd never heard her. Who? Tina who? It's a biopic about the singer Tina Turner and how she rose to stardom with her abusive husband Ike Turner, and how she gained the courage to break free. The script was written by Katie Lanier. So why What's Love Got to Do with It?
So I'm a big fan of biopics. I really enjoy them. And I feel that the Tina Turner story and her relationship with Ike Turner resulted in, on the surface, some amazing music, both during their relationship and after their relationship. But also underneath that, it was this just horrific struggle that, we see portrayed in, different media, but specifically in this film. So, you don't know that firsthand. I don't know that. I don't know what that's like. But I feel like Angela Bassett's performance, and based on the screenplay, that it really conveys Tina Turner's ability to overcome the obstacles in her life. And I feel like in telling the specific local story of Tina Turner, again, going back to an idea of mythology, that it's able to convey a universal story from what I can tell.
Sure.
Not being a woman.
Yeah.
But of a struggle that a talented female may face in a man's world, not only music, but the time period. And I think it's, again, it's empowering. And I think it's
just tells the story of an abused woman too. That it doesn't matter that she's Tina Turner.
Right.
She has the same struggles that any other woman would do. And the interesting thing about it is, you think, oh, she's famous, she could get out. She can't, because abused women can't get out.
right. Well, and that's what I mean, is that it's the specific story of Tina Turner, but it's the universal story, like you said, of an abused woman. And I think like that, to me, to be able to convey that in a movie format is tough, because you run up into something like The Burning Bed, or like Farrah Fawcett TV movie, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's sensationalistic, and it's not. Or you have something like Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts,
Which is
where
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's more of like a B movie. It has B movie. It's showing its hand too easily.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think What's Love Got to Do with It is much more nuanced, and I think I think it hits that. It's just hard. Like I just think it was. I think would be tough to make a movie like that again. Like to have all those pieces come together, where it tells a story. It's entertaining in the historical context, because you were familiar with this music and the history, but at the same time it reveals this side of this very popular, especially when the movie came out.
Huge comeback.
Yeah, Tina Turner was huge back.
Yeah.
Private like she was on her solo career, and her song was like the HBO theme. It's like she was huge. As far as music went, and that was her own trying. Like she had completely dissociated herself from Ike, and this was her life. So I just feel like that's to me that is a movie that could if a movie's going to be reconsidered or looked at in a new light, I feel like this could be one of those films. And I think the script is really an elemental part of the success of this film.
Yeah.
The greatest scene in that movie is when she finally gets the courage to leave Ike, and she goes to the motel and she has no money, which you realize this whole time, he controlled the purse string. She didn't have a way to get out. She goes and begs for a room, and she says, "My name is Tina Turner, and if you give me a room, I promise I'll pay you back."
Yeah.
And it just, heart dropped watching that.
Right. And to be able to have that work on those levels, it's like, that's just I think that's good writing, to be able to show that sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, like desperation and debasement, humiliation that she has to, she's like you look at that and you say like, well, who was like the creative force behind that? It was Tina Turner, but who was doing all the, pulling the levers in a really negative way? It was Ike. I just think it's a good screenplay. It's a good movie, solid. And I think a lot of times, I think a lot of people are more focused on Angela Bassett's biceps
Also,
than they were about, that's all the stories are about,
Yeah.
like how buff she was.
and her
all,
performance.
Well, and the performance, but
People kind of lost the screenplay in that, the performance was so good. That's what made the movie. And it was
Right.
all of those things.
and I feel like if it wouldn't have been for the screenplay, then that. But this is again, it's like that idea around Philadelphia. It's like you take like a very well constructed, and that's the thing is like a lot of times people say, well, if you don't notice it, that means that it's doing its job. And I think in some, it's a double-edged sword because when people want to draw attention to something like or like laud something, they'll be like, well, it's so good because you don't notice it.
Right.
And then if they want to deride it or something, they'll say like, well, it's solid, but there are better, there's other stuff that, that elevated it.
Well, it's always the stuff that's obvious that draws the attention.
Sure.
And I think that is one of the things that I'm hoping to achieve here with the 2020s in general, is to like draw attention to the things that maybe are overlooked because they're not so obvious. And it's like, wait, no, I know we all love, Pacino screaming in this movie, but what about, this quiet performance over here? So
Yeah.
I still haven't seen What's Love Got to Do with It, but looking forward to it now.
She got nominated for the Oscar.
She did.
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably will again. If people remember it.
I bet she will.
I would think so.
I bet she will. All right. Well, thank you, Brad. Appreciate you bringing those titles to our attention.
Good to be here.
If you want to see those movies once again, please visit our sponsor, Scarecrow Video. And if you want to see a live performance of some sort that Maybe Tina Turner will be there sometime. Check out the Fremont Abbey. If you are interested in hearing more of Brad's thoughts on True Romance, you can check out an older podcast. I'm not sure what number that'll be. And if you want to hear more about Groundhog Day, you can check out episode number 9, which we had Brian McDonald talking about that movie. If you're a movie lover and would like to support us, you can subscribe to the 2020 Film Club. Your annual subscription gets you into 10 of our monthly for your consideration screenings here in Seattle and a ticket to our annual ceremony in February. It's over a $100 value for only $40. And to enroll, just visit the 2020awards.org website and look for the subscriber link. Brad, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
You're so earnest. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to start thinking about the past.